Good evening, everyone. I'm the caller, and you are watching the Cheese Room podcast. We're 5 minutes late. I have had just the mare of all days today. Not only did I get stuck on the M1 going south to Milton Keynes with a 6-month-old child, a 3-year-old, and a missus, and you know how that is. It's 35 degrees outside. Stuck there for 2 hours just trying to get to IKEA, which at best of times can be described as a hellhole. So I've been late back, lacking in prep, lacking in charge on my iPod AirPod Pros. So I'm on my standard AirPods. I'm having to slum it. But I'm joined by a fantastic panel this evening. I'm really pleased that HG is joining me all the way from Vienna. How are you, HG?
I'm good. I also went to IKEA today, but I took public transport to get there rather than the motor. But you know, life is all right. I mean, it's not as hot here, but I'm still enjoying myself.
I've got a question then.
Oh.
How do you get things like flat pack things home on the train?
What do you mean? How do I get them home?
Well, yeah, the idea of IKEA is you drive up in your car. Yeah. Do they deliver?
Yeah. We have three. We really want to talk about IKEA. Oh, fine, okay.
I'm just interested.
We have three.
Curious.
If I want normal things such as, I don't know, like boards or cutlery or pans, we have one that's actually in the city centre. I can just go and get it. There's no one. So I either get a friend or you pay for delivery. I mean, like a lot of people, I guess.
There you go. Insight into Austrian IKEA. Jack, welcome back. All the way from stateside. How are you feeling?
Feeling good. I wish I, had as impressive or as, good of a mare story as you did, caller, for an intro. But, life's pretty normal for me. So I'll keep it at that. Looking forward to Sunday.
Trust me, I wish I hadn't. It was a race to get the children to bed tonight to be on here for 9. I've only had a couple of Budweisers. It's all like a grab. So, yeah, disaster. Let us know what you're drinking in the chat as ever.
Looking for things to turn for caller. Looking for the luck to turn.
I really am. And obviously playing Chelsea this weekend, I'm hoping for, what is it, a first win in 35 years there. So, no, a second win in 35 years, I think. Charlie, how you doing? Joining us this evening. I'm resident Chelsea fan for the night. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm not like you boys. I've not been to IKEA today, but fairly standard day. Not too much going on, but yeah, definitely looking forward to the game Sunday. Hopefully we can continue the winning start to the season. But yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting one for sure. But yeah, looking forward to getting stuck into it, and hopefully Spurs' poor run continues. But at some point it'll have to come to an end. Just hopefully not this weekend from my perspective, but you just never know.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, there's all to play for. We're a different team this season. Let's hope, because we haven't had much luck at Chelsea before. So we'll come on to that shortly. But we have got a very reasonable gooner who comes. We're an inclusive podcast. We're an inclusive show. We've got a rather nice gooner who comes on. So the pressure is on, Charlie. No pressure at all. You've got lots to live up to, flying the flag.
See what I can do.
Good stuff. And welcome to our channel members and patrons tonight in the chat. So massive shout out to you guys. Please do drop us a super chat. Let us know you're here. Let us know what's on your mind as we go through the show. Hit that like button. Onward. Chelsea versus Spurs, Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Fills me with dread, to be honest, this one, because not least because I watched us lose 4 times last season to Chelsea. Same as every other Tottenham fan, but we're a different team. Charlie, the Chelsea transfer business has been really quite chaotic the last few months. How's it been from a Chelsea perspective? Because your form fell off at the end of last season a bit.
Yeah, I mean, last season, it's sort of followed a traditional Chelsea model as such, where we start the season pretty well. We're in and around the title race around Christmas, normally in the top 2 or generally top at Christmas last few years. And then we go through December, everything goes wrong. Manager normally gets sacked, and then we sort of find our feet again January, February, and then we tail off and we just about end up scraping the top 4, and then we go again. I mean, we get a few trophies in the bag along the way, which kind of softens it. But yeah, it's interesting with us because, as I say, we picking up trophies. Obviously, last season went to both cup finals at Wembley, lost both of them, disappointing. 3 FA Cup final losses in a row. I think we're the only side that's ever done that, so it's not a great tag to have. But despite us not really challenging for the league since Conte won it for us in, I think, 16-17, we still seem to pick up trophies along the way. In terms of the transfer business, obviously, last summer's business was disastrous. Lukaku coming in for the £100 million, which just didn't work out at all. I mean, I feel a bit stupid now on my own channel, just on general, thinking, he's going to come in, he's going to score us the goals that could fire us to the league title. Couldn't have been more wrong. The other business was poor Saul coming on loan, which was dreadful. And then obviously this summer, we've come in, new owners, and sort of a different approach. Obviously the old boardroom as such cleared out. Bruce Buck no longer chairman. Obviously Marina Granatskaya, who's kind of chief negotiator, as it were, she's moved on. Petr Cech, who was technical director, has also moved on, and Bowley's very much, along with Begdad Egbali, who's on the board as well, very much kind of conducting a lot of the negotiations themselves. He seems to be jetting off all over the place. Tuchel heavily involved as well, which I think sometimes can be a little bit detrimental when you just need to focus on sort of improving the team on the pitch. But in terms of the transfer business, I mean, yes, we've missed out on a number of targets we're going under. Obviously, De Ligt ending up at Bayern Munich instead. Rafinha obviously going to Barca. Koundé going to Barca. Struggling, couldn't get Kimpembe to leave PSG. But in terms of the business we have done, I think Raheem Sterling's a great signing. We've struggled in attack, and he should make a difference. I think we do need a bit more, but at the same time, Koulibaly comes in. We needed to replace Rudiger. I think Koulibaly is a great centre half. It's one of those that's been sort of tipped with a move to the Premier League almost every summer, and it's kind of finally happened now. He's 31. I'll probably say it'll end up being an upgrade on Rudiger. And then we've also bought in Cucurella from Brighton as well. Yeah, look, slightly pricey, but at the same time, 24 years of age, versatile, can play left wing back, can play left back in a flat 4, can also play left centre back in a 3. So we're filling sort of 2/3 positions with one signing there, which I think is also a big plus. He'll only improve. And then I
think the other plus is he's got the David Luiz hair as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was asked about his hair. I think he the reason why his hair is long is because when he was younger, I think Carlos Puyol was one of his idols. But yeah, I mean, Cucurella, I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be like a bit of a cult hero with the fans. He had an impressive. I know it was only 15-20 minutes against Everton, but he looks impressive. And then the other business, we're also investing for the future with the likes of Slonina, the young goalkeeper coming in from the Chicago Fire, 18. We picked up Amari Hutchinson from Arsenal. I think he's the 17-year-old or 18-year-old now on a free. And we've also bought in Chukwuemeka from Aston Villa, which sort of took a lot of people by surprise. Part of the England under-19 setup that won the Euros in the summer. £20 million, just quite a lot. I mean, I think it's 10 plus 10 with add-ons as well. And by all accounts, he's going to be part of the first team squad. So pleased with the business because, I can see like it has appeared a little bit scattergun at times in terms of, it's this target, this target, this target. But I just think that there is some sort of a plan. And all the players we've been linked with are kind of top tier players. There's no one that we've sort of been linked with where I think, oh, no, I'm not sure that's really moving the needle for us or anything like that. But, we're hoping to, Wesley Fofana would be a phenomenal signing to get across the line. Things seem to be getting a little bit closer in that regard. It's going to take a lot of money. And then I think maybe Aubameyang as well. I mean, he scores goals. We need goals in the team, so I wouldn't be totally against it. But yeah, it's exciting times. I'm under no illusions that we're not going to challenge for the title. I think a third place is the best we'll do this season. But as long as we close the gap, bed the new signings in, and sort of build a squad for Tuchel with his own players, because at the end of the day, Tuchel's come in, he's done phenomenally well with everything that's been thrown at him. And, bar Lukaku last summer, I mean, he's only really had one permanent signing. This is his first window of getting his own players in. So we just need to allow him the time to try and build something. And it's easy to say not to get frustrated if things start going wrong, because as a football fan, it's very emotional. You lose a few games and you sort of think, everything's a disaster. Yeah. But I think we are building something good. And I think that in Thomas Tuchel, we can potentially have someone like a Pep, like a Klopp, where we can have him here for the next 5-6 years, mould his own team, mould his own squad. And hopefully we can sort of get close to that Premier League, because despite the European trophies and whatnot, we really need to build a challenge for the Premier League. And I think that's the big task in the next season. Well, the next couple of seasons is we need to be fighting for that championship, because it's been too long for a club like us, considering sort of the Premier Leagues we've picked up over the years, not been in contention for a number of years now. So that, I think, for me, that's the big game this season, to get a couple more quality players in and just close that gap to Liverpool and City. And then hopefully maybe next season we can start to perhaps challenge for the title. But at the moment, I think it's very much just bed in the new signings, try and pick up a domestic cup, and just finishing that top four again.
Yeah, sure. HG, have you been impressed with Chelsea's transfer business? Cucurella, I thought they overpaid for him a bit, and I can't get my head round Fofana from Leicester for what, 80 million or something? It's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money, and he's only had one good season because he was injured for the second one. But he's young and he's highly rated, and if Chelsea feel that's where they need to go, then I guess that's what they have to do. It does strike me as being an odd selection because there were other defenders out there for sure who would cost less. But that will be, if Tuchel has decided that's the one he wants, then fair enough. As for Sterling, well, anyone who knows who watches this knows that I don't rate Raheem Sterling that much. So he's obviously offers them something different, which is good, right? They do need something different. As much as they always beat Spurs, they are quite predictable. Chelsea, sometimes they like to keep the ball. They're quite slow in possession. They have the players to win games, but no real X factor. And Sterling might give them that. But I'm not massively. I mean, Koulibaly is he's retirement home at Chelsea. He's going to retire there. So they're good players, but I don't feel that Chelsea. We talk about everyone wants to catch Liverpool and Man City. And we all know that they are very structured in how they play, and everyone knows what they're going to do, and it's just very difficult to stop them. And Spurs and Chelsea are trying to develop that, but I just think that, as we saw from the second half of last season, that Chelsea are becoming quite predictable to play against, and teams can stop them. And they were drawing a lot of games. They weren't losing, which is obviously a good thing, but they were drawing a lot. And I just don't know if they've done enough to really propel themselves into being the side that Tuchel wants them to be yet. It's my personal opinion.
Jack, any comment?
Cucurella, despite, I think I agree with kind of the common sentiment that maybe they overpaid for him. I still am kind of a big fan of his, or at least I rate him very highly. I think he's kind of one of the most technically gifted sort of kind of players, at least that Brighton had last season. I kind of thought he was actually secretly maybe Brighton's best player even last season, just because he played so many different positions for them and kind of proved to just be able to just, give you at least a 7 out of 10. I mean, he marked Kulu out of the game at left-sided center back. His natural position really is more of a left wing back anyways, and that's probably what he'll be playing over at Chelsea. I think he's going to be a huge upgrade actually on Marcos Alonso. And the good thing though about that is Marcos Alonso has an excellent record against Spurs. It'll be nice to see, him actually go away. That guy absolutely turns it on against us.
He does every time.
But Marc Cucurella, I think, is a better player than Marcos Alonso maybe ever was, at any stage, despite, maybe how also technically gifted, Alonso was. I really rate that signing, again, despite how much they overpaid. In the case of, I don't know, Sterling, I'm kind of like HG. I don't really like Sterling very much, and I'm not really the biggest fan of his, but the numbers kind of don't lie at the end of the day with some of the things. I think he's like Pep's third highest ever scorer or something like that, behind Sergio Aguero and like one other player I think I'm forgetting. And there's some other kind of ridiculous stat where he is kind of, I think, one of the all-time kind of Premier League scorers, at least of like the last 10 years or so. And so you do kind of have to look at the fact maybe he was, playing for a ridiculous team, in Pep's team, but he was, Pep's quote unquote favorite, at one stage in time, and, was seen as maybe the most dangerous player alongside Kevin De Bruyne in that Guardiola side. So I feel like they've made some good transfers. I feel like they've made some odd transfers, that's for sure. It feels like it's just kind of a Todd Bowley, maybe just trying to take control of, all the transfers, which I think is a bad recipe for Chelsea. I think we know that as well, Collar, when, our owner takes, a big hand and, the transfers. I think Bowley is doing a similar thing there where he wants to have full control of it. Maybe he's going to hire a technical director later. I would advise, as soon as possible, because there's a reason why, the technical directors are improving clubs so, quickly nowadays. So maybe the sooner Chelsea get a new technical director of football in, maybe the more sense those transfers would make. But at the same time, I think some of those transfers that they have made, I do rate, despite maybe how much they overpaid.
Charlie, who do you think's had the best window, Spurs or Chelsea so far? Obviously,
I don't know. It depends what you sort of how you look at it in terms of like what was required for each team coming into this season. For example, I think the one thing for Spurs was, a complete lack of depth in that centre forward role. If anything was to happen to Harry Kane, or if he was needed to be rested for a few games or whatnot, I think in bringing in Richarlison, and get a player that Chelsea were linked with as well, but ultimately decided to go elsewhere. Look, £50 million is a lot of money to spend on Richarlison. I think he's a decent player. He's done okay at Everton in a very poor side, if we're being perfectly honest. And he will add quality from the bench, and he'll add he'll add some quality if he starts. I still don't think he starts ahead of Kulusevski for me. I think Kulusevski's been phenomenal since he's come in, but Richarlison will see plenty of minutes. I think that's a good signing. Steeliness in the middle of the park as well. Yves Bissouma, another player from Brighton. If Cucurella wasn't Brighton's best player last season, then Bissouma would certainly be right up there as well. I think great signing, and addresses that kind of, adds a bit of steeliness, a bit of physicality to the middle of the park there to complement Højbjerg, complement the likes of Bentancur as well. And then I think I'm trying to think of Spurs assignment at the back. Ivan Perisic coming in a wing back role, again another player Chelsea were linked with a couple seasons ago. I think someone with great experience, and someone that last season at Inter Milan was very good in that wing back position, despite being 33 years of age, can still get up and down that pitch. And then Ryan Sessegnon as well. There's a young player coming through with plenty of promise, even though he's been at Spurs for a number of years now. I think he's sort of getting his chance now that Conte's obviously disposed of Reguilon. So I think Spurs have done good business for sure. Is it going to be enough to cement them in a top four? Is it going to be enough for them to get out the Champions League group stages, perhaps, and go far in a domestic cup again, get that elusive trophy that you're so desperate for at the moment? It obviously only time will tell. I don't know who's. I don't know. I find it quite hard to say who's at a better window because it's still open. I'll probably say it's fairly even. I think Chelsea have added real quality in terms of the likes of Sterling, Koulibaly, and Cucurella. That those three players improved the first team, but then I think Spurs have also improved their first team, and Spurs have massively improved their squad depth, which I think for you guys was a big problem when in seasons gone by. Look at Spurs, you think pretty decent 11, not a bad 11, but if anything happens to any of those 11, the drop off in quality from the starting lineup to the replacements on the bench was quite steep. And I think now that Conte, Paratici, who's come in and I think has done a really good job there, and Levy's actually backing the manager as well, which is I suppose which is great news for you guys. I think Spurs have had a very good window. I don't know if they're going to do any more business or not. Remains to be seen. If an opportunity comes along, then they may well do. But if Chelsea get Fofana and De Jong, for example, then I'll probably say we've had a better window. But as it stands, I think it's fairly even right now. I think Spurs have addressed some key areas that they need to. I think that Chelsea have also addressed key areas as well. And also a good window is also keeping hold of your players as well, not just the ones you bring in. So I think Chelsea with the likes of moving out the likes of Malang Sarr, Marcus Alonso, Timo Werner, Romelu Lukaku, clearing out sort of dead wood from the squad.
I want to ask you about them, actually, Charlie. I want to ask you about them because obviously Timo Werner's left for a loss. Lukaku left for a really heavy loss.
Oh, yeah. We're still paying for it.
You may run into some FFP issues down the line on those with those two, but and Marcus Alonso obviously going to Barcelona potentially. Is it concerning that you're running into such massive losses with these players for the future?
Possibly, but again, those signings were made under the old ownership, so it's technically not really Todd Bowley's money or whatnot. So it's kind of those signings made under the old regime is kind of like neither here nor there in terms of does it affect Bowley. Obviously, FFP done over 3 years, so I think we should be all right. I mean, that's why we can spend sort of quite a large amount of money potentially with Fofana coming in, over £300 million. We'd have to be a bit more frugal the following maybe couple of windows, but there is scope to spend quite heavily this summer, which I think as a new owners, you want to come in first window, you want to make a statement. But in terms of the losses on those players, I mean, unfortunately, it's just the way it goes. Lukaku's stocks were high at Inter Milan. We desperately needed a centre forward after that Champions League win. Harry Kane wasn't going to happen. Lewandowski wasn't prepared to leave Bayern at that point. Erling Haaland, we explored it, proved to be far too expensive until his release clause come into effect this summer. So you look at it and Lukaku, you think, oh, it'd be a good signing. It just didn't work out at all. And then you're never, ever going to get that sort of money, anywhere near that money back from him after that disastrous season he had. And the same with Timo Werner, £50 million, are excited by it. Had a great season at RB Leipzig, German international. You think, this guy could be decent. And as with so many forward players, they come to Chelsea and it's just a graveyard for them. We've really in the last 20 odd years, we've had two successful centre forwards, and that's Drogba and Costa. We've had Torres, Morata, Higuain, Samuel Eto'o, Giroud. We've had so many, and it's just not really worked out. So yes, it's disappointing from a business perspective, not to recoup this money, but it's not a surprise at all because the markets, if you're playing well, you're worth like 50 or you're worth 50 million, 100 million, or whatever. But as soon as you have one bad season, you lose half your value. And at the end of the day, Lukaku is obviously gone on loan. I think we've got €8 million loan fee for him, and then I think he'll probably extend the loan, and there'll be an option to buy in a couple of years or something like that. We just have to accept, just have to take it on the chin. Sometimes transfers don't work out, but with Chelsea, particularly with big money signings, more often than not, they haven't worked out. And that's something that under this ownership has got to change because it's not sustainable to continue spending big money on players and for them to just not work out. So I'm hoping that, this window that some of these players will do
Charlie,
well.
Just to interrupt for a second, are you not worried that you don't have a striker going into the season and the season started? And you've got what, Broja, the young kid who's decent on loan?
Kai Havertz, Havertz is frustrating because there's obviously ability there with Havertz, but there's no consistency. And he's just kind of, at the moment, he's very much living off that goal in the Champions League final, which, fantastic, great, obviously grateful for that, of course. But at the same time, this is Chelsea and, he's kind of the number 9 position sort of fallen into his lap. Werner's moved on. He was never really played as a 9 at Chelsea anyway. The big money signing in Lukaku's gone and we haven't bought in another forward yet. Is it a concern we haven't got a centre forward? I don't know. It depends how you look at it because the two teams that everyone's chasing, you look at Man City, obviously now they obviously play with a centre forward in Haaland, but much of their success last season, they didn't really play with a centre forward. Obviously, when Aguero was there, he played. That was different. Liverpool don't necessarily play with an out-and-out forward. But it depends how you do it. I mean,
Tuchel as well, though. Tuchel has found success, before. He was the only guy, I think, he was the only guy that was able to make Mbappe and Neymar be able to work together, and like a real cohesive.
Neymar had his best numbers under Tuchel, and
exactly.
So
I think Neymar is actually supposedly going to have another good season, but I mean, Tuchel's the only guy that's able to have Aubameyang, produce his best numbers, have Neymar and Mbappe produce their best numbers. It's kind of weird. It feels like Tuchel, except for Lukaku, seems to actually do really well with those toxic sort of kind of forwards. It seems to speak their language, maybe, so to speak. But I would say, though, just quickly, and then I'll let Charlie go back in. But Caller, on your original question about the two different windows between Spurs and Chelsea, I feel like there were two different objectives that Charlie was bringing up. Like Spurs had the objective of beefing up the squad and making us a more formidable squad going into all these various competitions and pushing for the league. But Chelsea had kind of the objective of basically replacing the players that haven't worked out / the players that have been there a while and are leaving. So it is kind of, I think, two different objectives, where Chelsea's case is a bit awkward, where you're having players that are trying to all leave apparently to Barcelona who can't afford them. And then Chelsea's just trying to wait to let them go and then, replace those players. And then also in the case of Werner and Lukaku and whatnot, they're players that looked like they would have worked out, but ended up not working out. And then they're just trying to find the right replacement for those as well. So I feel like Chelsea is just more chopping and changing kind of, transfer window of what didn't work out and keeping what has worked. Whereas Spurs is just an originally good 11, and then we're just trying to beef up everything outside of it, and strengthen, with everything else. So I think it's just two different transfer objectives, if you know what I mean.
I'd be interested to see who plays up top for Chelsea at the weekend, actually, because obviously I would say, Charlie, the thing that is the biggest issue for you guys is a striker, isn't it? And Aubameyang's not going to fix that, is he?
Well, he certainly scores goals, but I think another problem for us is the creativity to actually getting the chances for these guys to put in a net. Yes, the attackers aren't the most clinical and they don't necessarily get in the best positions and whatnot, but a big issue is that with this back five system, as you guys know, with Conte employing it at Spurs now, that it's so heavily reliant on the wing backs to get forward and produce a lot of to produce the vast majority of the chances that, you know, if they're not on form, then it can be quite problematic, and there's not many chances. But I think just the creativity from the middle of the park is not there. You know, when we had Cesc Fabregas, just someone that can just pick a pass and unlock a defence and just play someone in. Like last week, you know, we see Kevin De Bruyne playing that pass for Haaland. You know, our forwards make these runs, but they haven't got the kind of the quality or the football brains in the middle of the park to pick those passes out. You know, the likes of Kovacic, Jorginho, Kante, good football players, of course, in their own rights, but there's no one in there that you would think can pick a pass out, you know, like a Christian Eriksen with like a Mata has in the past, like Fabregas as well. So that's one of the major issues is the supply line, the creativity supplying the attackers. And the next issue is the fact that the attack just doesn't seem to be very good. Now that's kind of like, that can be twofold, you know. Obviously it's down to the manager in Tuchel to try and get more out of these attacking players. As we just discussed, you know, Tuchel can get good performances out of attacking players. We've seen him with Neymar, we've seen him with Aubameyang, etc. You know, Tuchel can't not coach attacking players. It's just that Chelsea, it just doesn't seem to have happened in terms of the defense. Like, he's improved the defense a lot. The midfield players have improved. No attackers since Tuchel's been here have improved at Chelsea. I'm not saying it's all on him, because it's not all on him, but part of your job as a manager is trying to improve what you've got player-wise already. And I just don't think he's improved the attack enough. So hopefully, you know, if Aubameyang comes in, does it make a difference? I think it does. It adds quality to the attack. It adds goal scoring. One thing about Aubameyang, okay, you can maybe question his attitude. We don't really know what happened with his exit at Arsenal. Obviously, there's two sides to it. Tuchel's got a good relationship with him from Dortmund. I think pros for Aubameyang, Premier League proven, point to prove in coming back to the Premier League if he did, after how it ended at Arsenal. He's a golden boot winner in here. He scores goals wherever he goes. He knows how to score goals, but there's always a worry for me that any sort of forward player that comes in at Chelsea, given how few have succeeded over the years, there's always a slight doubt in the back of the mind that would he work out? But having said that, you know, over the years, we've had a little bit more success really with, say, slightly cheaper signings, as it were, or like slightly aging forwards in terms of, like, I'm not saying that Samuel Eto'o was phenomenal at Chelsea, but he wasn't dreadful. You know, likes of Eto'o, likes of Olivier Giroud, who came in. I know he came in when he was about 29, 30, but he did a pretty good job at Chelsea.
He was about 36, wasn't he?
Yeah, he did a pretty good job. So I think with this kind of striker, Aubameyang sort of falls into that category of someone that, like, for me, it would be relatively risk-free. It's not going to take a huge amount of money, about 15, 20 million pounds. He's got a point to prove, as I said, proven goal scorer, golden boot winner. On a 2-year deal, 15, 20 million pounds. I think it's relatively risk-free. But again, until he actually arrives and came in, I don't know if, like, obviously, sort of how much difference it would make. But I'd much rather have Aubameyang up front than Kai Havertz currently, because Havertz at the moment just isn't it.
I think Tuchel is a bit unfairly judged with, you know, not being able to, you know, have a good enough attacking play, because at the end of the day, he still had 7 more goals, or Chelsea had 7 more goals scored than us, you know, last season. And I know we really, you know, kind of started off late because of Nuno and whatnot, so maybe they had more of a head start than we did, but they still did score 7 more than we did. And I think they also conceded 7 fewer goals than we did as well. And so when you really look at it, Tuchel at one stage, I think, has been dealing with a bunch of injuries. Like Pulisic is always hurt. When you look at, you know, Ziyech, I feel like that guy was either hurt or not really banging either. You know, like, you know, he's said a lot with Havertz being inconsistent. Mason Mount, I would say, has been the only player that's been of any sort of consistency in that team. And I remember at one stage, and I think Charlie would be able to speak to this, but Caller, I don't know about you. Do you remember that, you know, part last season where for like 3 weeks in a row, Chelsea were like scoring like 5-6 goals a game with like Ben Chilwell and Reece James, and it was like they were like, people were thinking they were going to become like, you know, the top scorers of the league, you know, and whatnot. I feel like Thomas Tuchel despite having a bit of a graveyard with some of these forwards that he hasn't worked out with, he's clearly shown that he can create goals. And maybe he's just trying to, maybe he's just picky. I don't know. Maybe not every forward works for him, but he's found a way to create goals. I feel like even last season, I remember Reece James was scoring a brace for 3 weeks in a row, and Ben Chilwell had a hat trick at one stage or whatever it was. It was just ridiculous. So I feel like Thomas Tuchel is a good enough manager to be able to adapt to, different circumstances. And I also feel like all of his forwards, if I recall last season, were either, too, hurt, emotionally with not scoring and, had too much, kind of ducks, going on or as well, they were always hurt. So I feel like, he's maybe been unfairly treated, I would say, with that sort of brush of not being able to score goals. And also maybe because he's a Spurs fan, caller. So maybe I'm just trying to defend him.
He is a Spurs fan, that is true. Over 100 people watching. Can I please encourage you to hit that like button? Really helps us out. Takes a second of your time, costs you nothing. HG, you watch the German League. You commentate professionally on the German League.
I have done, yes.
Yeah. You've got some more work coming up, haven't you?
Tomorrow I'm doing a game.
There you go.
About that, do it?
No, my question was Tuchel. You're a fan of his, aren't you? And sorry, let me just give you the question because I'm going to run off and get another beer. So I don't want to set you off half-cut. Because you guys can debate this between you. I think I've got 3 talkers on the panel tonight. I'm cool. I can go get a beer, have a chat with the missus, be back, and you'll still be on the same point. I really want to get into Aubameyang, Tuchel. They had a good relationship, didn't they, at Dortmund? And do you think that would work well at Chelsea? Can you see it something that's coming off? What kind of job do you think Tuchel's doing, and kind of your view of the job he's done at Chelsea, and maybe just back with Charlie and Jack a little bit?
All right. Look, I definitely rate Tuchel as a manager. Back in 2014, when Spurs were looking, I wanted him to get the job ahead of Poch. I mean, obviously it worked out with Poch, but that doesn't mean that Tuchel's not a bad manager. It's an interesting one with Tuchel because having done well at Mainz and having done well at Dortmund, he fell out with the bosses at Dortmund, and you just you wondered where he was going to go. And PSG gets him to the final of the Champions League when he sat there on his, with his foot in his boot, this poor sod who really wants to do more but can't. It's just interesting because you come into Chelsea, you've taken over from Frank Lampard, you get them to the Champions League final and win it within 6 months. You are clearly a good manager if you can do that. And so where do you go from
Also,
there?
the biggest show up of a previous manager I've ever seen. Frank Lampard was complaining about, that transfer window, complaining about the players that was brought in. Tuchel takes all those players and wins the Champions League, that season. I've never seen a manager show up a previous manager in such a way,
we usually have a resident Everton fan who watches our show, and it doesn't mean he's going to be bad for Everton, but Tuchel's clearly on another level. We've got, as far as I'm concerned, 4 of the best, 6, 7 managers in world football in the league, and thankfully one's at Spurs and one's at Chelsea. But last year was a disappointment. I mean, Charlie alluded to it that they started the season well. They were there or thereabouts with Man City and Liverpool, and then something changed, and I don't really know what it was. I mean, Charlie would know this better than I, but for them to go on the run of results where was at one point they were ahead of Spurs by the end of the season, and we had a rough first half of the year before we started to buy players that were actually half decent and that knew what Conte wanted. So it's a weird one. Aubameyang will go to Chelsea and do well. I mean, if he goes there, he'll do well because he knows what Tuchel wants. Just like Perisic will probably do well at Spurs because he knows what Conte wants. To have a relationship between manager and player is obviously a really good thing.
Yeah.
But I still can't get over how it ended for them last year. Charlie will know this better than me, but I don't know how they could go from a team that were winning games regularly to one that was just drawing all the time. Was it just lack of goals, Charlie, or what changed?
I think it's a number of things. I think, obviously, as I referred to earlier, in this 3-4-3, 3-5-2, whatever you want to call it, the wing backs are so crucial to that system. And we started off really well. When we lost Ben Chilwell to obviously that ACL injury against Juventus in the Champions League group stage in October, we played one of our best games of the season, probably our best performance of the season when we beat Juve 4-0 at Stamford Bridge. We lose Chilwell to that injury, and then you get you then get the Lukaku interview coming out, and then Reece James is picking up injuries. We're missing, like, for large parts of the season, missing both of our first choice fullbacks. And, you know, no disrespect, but Marcus Alonso has been a good servant to Chelsea. He's not Ben Chilwell. He's okay. He's quite good going forward, pops up with the odd goal here or there, has a few clutch moments, but defensively, he's not great. And on that right-hand side, I mean, Azpilicueta, an absolute club legend, but, you know, he's mid-30s now, getting on a bit. He hasn't got the energy to get up and down that pitch to play in that wing-back slot. So that was a massive problem. Kind of the two key players to this system, both gone. And that's difficult to replace. I think slightly the squad slightly exposed in that area where we didn't actually have decent backup to either of those two players. And considering Chelsea normally play 60-odd games a season, and injury suspensions are bound to occur, then I mean, I think that wasn't great sort of planning on our behalf. But the Lukaku interview wasn't ideal either. And I just think with the sanctions as well, the sanctions come in. I mean, like, despite it being an off the field issue, the fact that Tuchel's turning up to press conferences and all he's getting asked about is Ukraine, he's getting asked about the sanctions. Is the club going to go? You get reports in the media, Chelsea going out of business, it's going to be a disaster, are Chelsea ever going to be the same again? Like, all these things aren't helpful and not conducive to producing good performances on the pitch. As much as you try and separate the two, you know, you're turning up to the training ground each day and you're thinking, oh, what's happening to the club? Is someone going to buy it? You know, it was a long drawn out process as well. I know I'm not saying that like a deal worth £3 to £4 billion is going to be concluded quickly, but it felt like a very long process.
He was also answering a lot of like political like kind of questions at the time. I remember as well, and he handled them quite well, if I recall. Like, handled them with actually a bit of class. And you're right, it was a toxic time period.
It was difficult. It really was difficult. But I think all those things add up. I'm not making excuses, but these are just kind of matter of fact things. You know, you take two of your most attacking players out of your system. Most teams are going to struggle. The Lukaku interview didn't help at all. That unsettled the dressing room a lot. Then they got obviously the contract issues with Rudiger and Christensen both leaving on frees. It wasn't ideal. Is it a concern? It is a slight concern because it seems to be a bit of a rinse and repeat cycle. We never seem to have like a consistent season where we're consistently good throughout the majority of the season. Every team's going to have patches where they struggle, but for Chelsea, it seems to always be a good start. Luckily, this season there's no Christmas period because of the World Cup, so we haven't got to play in December. So maybe that might help us out. But yeah, no, it's not a concern. I just think if we're gonna. It's got to be addressed if we're going to get anywhere near challenging for the league in the next couple of seasons. We can't afford to have that level of drop-off, and we can't afford for our home form, which is normally very good. Last season was dreadful, dropping fast, not necessarily losing games, but just drawing so many matches at home and dropping so many points. So, like, yeah, it is a little bit of a concern, but I think with Tuchel, we can get it right.
I think with Chelsea that there's this. Like, I mean, we've seen it with Spurs. We went through 3 seasons where we just bought terribly. It wasn't even the season where we didn't buy anyone. We just didn't purchase players well. And I think about the players that Chelsea have signed in the last few years. For the big money purchases, I'm not sure any have really come off. You know, you're looking at Pulisic, you're looking at Werner, you're looking at Lukaku. You start to wonder, like, Kovacic was a good buy, right? So I think he's done really well for them. But even with the youth, you know, with the academy products you've got coming through, who are clearly very good, there is this kind of everything needs to be functioning. And as you said yourself, like, he's got rid of those players that he realizes can't really do what he wants them to do. And now the proof will be in this lot. And if Sterling hits the ground running, and if Cucurella, then the money you pay for them becomes irrelevant. It just becomes a stupid little thing that fans will use against each other, where it's like, well, you know, we got Richarlison for less than you got Cucurella. Well, who cares, right? Like, if the team is better, it doesn't necessarily matter. So it's a weird time. Like, I feel like when you look at Liverpool and Man City, they get those recruitment decisions right. And that's why they're far ahead of everyone else. And the rest of us are just hoping, like, Spurs have got decent strikers, so that will give us a chance. And Chelsea don't concede too many, so that will always give them a chance. But if you can get that, if you can tip the balance just that little bit further in your favour, you can win a fair chunk of games, given the financial power that both clubs have now.
Yeah, it is fine margins. And I think that the pressure will be on Tuchel. The pressure is always on when you're a manager at Chelsea. But I think particularly now that this is Tuchel's first window where he's had basically virtually 100% say on the players that he wants. These are his players coming in. So now the pressure's on him. Bowley's backed him and will continue to back him. But if, as I said, if Fofana comes in and we end up spending £300 million, the pressure ramps up again on Tuchel because these are his players and he has to get a tune out of them. So it'll be interesting to see how he integrates these new signings into the side. You know, the three we've brought in at the moment, you know, Koulibaly, Sterling and Cucurella seems to be positive signs. But obviously, season's not just one game; it's a long season. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Tuchel does now that he's got his own players to bring in, and hopefully that might see a change in fortunes potentially.
Well, this is how you lined up last weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Do you think that'll be similar to this, or any changes?
To be perfectly honest, I mean, Kovacic's out with a knee injury; he's not going to play. I mean, from a Tuchel perspective, I think that's pretty much exactly what he'll play. Again, personally, I'd probably take Aspie out, put Reece James at right centre back to try and combat Son, and play Loftus-Cheek at right wing back. Or another option is to switch Koulibaly to right-sided centre half and bring Cucurella in on the left centre back. But I don't think Tuchel will do that. I think Tuchel will very much go with this exact. I think it will be exactly the same team. The only possible change is Cucurella to play maybe instead of Chilwell. But other than that, I think it pretty much be the same side.
Should we be worried about that side, HG? What is there anything in that worries you? Do you think our 11's better? Let's talk about a combined 11. Let's talk about what you and Jack expect from Spurs this weekend. What 11 do you think you will play, and where would you say we've got a combined 11? And then Charlie, I'm going to come back to you and ask you which Spurs players get in the Chelsea 11. So that'll be quite fun. HG, lead us off.
All right. Well, I mean, if you look at the combined 11, like it's very easy to make these decisions now because we both play a similar formation. Like you talk to trying to make an Arsenal Spurs joint 11, you can't really do it because one plays with a back four and one doesn't. But in this case, I think the wing backs, you'd have to say that Reece James is probably better than any right wing back that we've got. And I mean, they're all very good players. Like I think Thiago Silva obviously has more experience than Dyer, so you'd probably go there. And that's not to say that Dyer is a bad player. He's not. But, given the option, you'd probably want... And Azpilicueta has been fantastic for Chelsea. And, I don't remember him playing badly, really, especially against Spurs. But the thing is, worrying about Chelsea, well, we're Spurs. We know that Chelsea will play one of their best games against us because they always do. Whether we were good or bad, that's irrelevant. They always play well against us. So I don't know if I'm nervous about it. I'm certainly not as nervous as I have been in previous years because we've got a much better side now. But if I look at that team, I think we could play that team 10 games, and we might win 3, and they might win 3. I think we're very, very level right now. And if anything, Spurs, if they have something going for them, is the fact that our 11 has been pretty much the same for a good 3-4 months now. So we know what we're going to do. And Chelsea are still trying to integrate a few players that it might take them time to be able to do it.
And in terms of combined 11, who would you have then? What would your combined 11 be, HG?
Well, I'd have Lloris in goal over Mendy. It's really tough to pick them because I can sit there and say.
Well, that's why I'm asking you.
Well, no, but the thing is, if I'm going to put Thiago Silva at centre back in the middle, then I might, Dyer and Davies work well together. Romero is better. I might put Azpilicueta on the left, Romero at right centre back, and then have Thiago Silva in the middle because I think Azpilicueta played on the left when Chelsea won the league that season. At the left of a back three.
So that's two Spurs, 2 Chelsea so far. Yeah, let's move into midfield.
Someone else want to take over?
No. Yeah, I want to hear.
You want mine, really? Okay. Well,
he doesn't seem he wants to do it there, Collar. He seems pull the teeth out.
I would take Reece James over any wing back we've got. I'd probably play Perisic over Chilwell because as much as Chilwell was good, I think Perisic has proven to be a better player over the years. In central midfield, I hate Jorginho. I don't think he's any good, so he certainly wouldn't be in it. But then, yeah, like who do you pick instead? Like Conte, like if it's 3 years ago, you pick Conte, no questions asked. But now, like maybe you want to go for the partnership that Spurs have had, and the idea of Bentancur and Højbjerg working really well together. You might want to do that. But like if you're picking an 11, to me, it's about not picking the better players. It's about picking an 11 that works. So the front three to me is all Spurs because that front three works, and we know it works. Like I think I saw the stat today that. Like since Kulusevski came into the side, the 3 Spurs players have scored the same amount of goals that Chelsea have scored. Now that's clearly to me an obvious sign that the front 3 would be Spurs. But like, yeah, what are you going to get from Conte? Are you going to get the guy from 2-3 years ago that was bossing things, or are you going to get the kind of injury-prone guy that we've seen for the last year or so? That's a tough call, but I think I'd probably stick with the 2 Spurs players in midfield.
Okay, Jack.
Romero gets in there. I think Thiago Silva and Koulibaly keep their places as good as Dyer and Davies have been for us. I think Perisic or Sessegnon get ahead of Chilwell, but like I said, I do really rate Cucurella. Then again, though, he hasn't really played a game for Chelsea, so I don't know if we can really include him. So I would put Perisic or Sessegnon ahead of Chilwell. I feel like Chilwell is good technically, and he's actually good going forward. Just feel like with all the injuries and whatnot, he just seems like someone that you could kind of bully, a bit if you had a very physical wing back going up against him. He just seems like he kind of pulls out of challenges, kind of pulls out of, physical moments, if you ask me. I kind of agree with HG. I think Jorginho, I don't know if he's bad, but I think he might be a bit overrated, I think is, the common belief there. I think Bentancur gets in there. I agree with the whole Conte statement. Like Conte on his best day is still one of the best midfielders in the world, but when's the last time that we've seen that? So maybe you would go Bentancur and Højbjerg there. Reece James is the best wing back in one of the Premier League, if not the world, I think in general. So I think he keeps his spot. I think Spurs' front 3 gets in there, if you ask me. I do really rate Mason Mount quite highly, though. I think Mason Mount, I don't know why people think he's overrated. I don't know why people think, he needs to do better. Like, you just look at his numbers. You look at what he's done for Chelsea. Even when people have complained about Chelsea not scoring enough goals, that guy scores the goals and that guy gets it done. Also in the big moments, he gets it done as well. And he kind of works his tail off whenever he's on the field as well. I'm kind of a big fan of Mason Mount, and I think he's a bit disrespected despite him wearing or, having the predicament of, wearing the other kit. But yeah, so Spurs' front 3 gets in there. I think Perisic or Sessegnon get ahead of Chilwell. I would put Cucurella ahead of all of them, but he hasn't played for Chelsea. Højbjerg and Bentancur get in there, as crazy as that sounds. And then Romero, and then Lloris.
Interesting. Well, I'll give you mine very quickly. I think I'll take Mendy because his distribution's better than Lloris.
That's true.
Right centre back Romero is the best right centre back in the league. Silva, a flip a coin. Yeah, keep him in there for the sake of it. Koulibaly's, yes, he's better than Ben Davis. James, absolutely, he's better than Doherty. Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying that. It's sacrilege, isn't it? Chilwell doesn't get in for me. I think Perisic is very, very good. Although I think Sessegnon will play, ironically. Jorginho and Conte, again, it's very close. I think Bentancur is probably in there with Conte for me, just because I'm misty-eyed about how good Conte's been over the last few years. And then Kane's a better player than Sterling. Mount isn't as good as Kulusevski, sorry to say. And
yeah, I agree.
Havertz isn't as good as Son. So that's 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's a pretty even split. So Charlie, no pressure. We want to hear from you. Over to you, my friend.
I mean, I'd keep Mendy in the sticks. I keep Koulibaly and Silva. I do agree with you boys. I think Romero would be in my combined team. Reece James is a no-brainer. Again, with Chilwell, I think Chilwell is fundamentally probably is better than Perisic and is better than Sessegnon. But obviously, we're going on current form. Chile's obviously coming back from a long-term injury. So I can understand why you boys might put Perisic or whatnot over him. But I think if we're talking about a fully fit Ben Chilwell, the one we saw at the start of last season before he gets injured, then it's a different story. But I think as of right now, then you probably would say that. I mean, I would, as Jack said, I would put Cucurella probably ahead of everyone. But obviously, he said he's only.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure he gets ahead of Perisic, Charlie. I'm really not.
What, Cucurella?
Look at what Perisic has achieved in his career.
Oh yeah, no, he's been good. But I mean, Perisic didn't even start last week, did he, for Spurs?
Yeah, so
he's nursing an injury. He's coming back from an injury. I agree with you, caller. I think Perisic will get more goals and assists than Cucurella will in a season, but I think you have to look at the fact that Cucurella has maybe played in the Premier League and has shown that he is definitely Premier League.
Anyway, I've interrupted you.
Even though we know Perisic is.
No, it's all good. I mean, probably Perisic, but I mean, if Chilwell's fully fit for me, he's in. Midfield's interesting. I mean, again, if you're just purely picking it on who's better, then obviously I think Kante's definitely in there. I mean, I do like Højbjerg as a player. I think he's pretty decent. I mean, Bentancur is not bad. I mean, Basuma's is half decent as well. I think Kante's definitely in. I mean, I like Jorginho. I think he's a good player. He's got a very specific kind of set of skills. You know exactly what you're going to get from him. He dictates the pace of the game. You know, he holds on to the ball. He keeps possession. Well, I'll probably stick with those two in midfield. Then the front line, I can't really argue with it. I mean, Kane and Son are miles clear of anything we've got. I'm a big fan of Kulusevski. I think Mason Mount's a great footballer. I mean, I think he's not far off Phil Foden levels. And the amount of, how good people say Phil Foden are when Mount actually posts better numbers than that. I think just Foden's got a better PR team or something like that because... Mount does better numbers than Foden, and Foden seems to get talked about as like a world beater. I think Foden's a phenomenal talent, but I think a lot of people do overlook Mount. But having said that, I mean, my only one I could possibly think is maybe Sterling, just because, the Premier League experience, what he's done in his career. Only Aguero and Messi have scored 100 goals under Pep, and Sterling's the other one. Only Salah and Mane have more goals as a wide player in the Premier League than Sterling. So he's got a phenomenal record, but I mean, I'd probably just have Sterling, but along with Kane and Son. But I think Kulusevski is a great player. I mean, I think he's got 22 years of age now, coming in January. It's an instant impact. The biggest compliment I give him is looks like he's been playing there for years, and he's a top player. So I'd probably give the front line to Spurs. Although if I was going to swap one, it would be probably Sterling for Kulusevski, just because of his career so far. Nothing against Kulusevski as a player. So yeah. That would be my team. So it's a fairly even split. It's about 3-4 Spurs players. But again, as HG said, it depends so many things. It's not just who's better. It's what players work best in a system as well. That's another key thing, because not all the best players make the best team.
No, absolutely. Well, it'll be an interesting one. Just Spurs boys, how are we expecting to line up the weekend? HG, do you think it'd be very similar to last weekend?
I'd be surprised if we kept with Sessegnon. I will say that I think that Perisic was brought in to be a better player than what we had, and it's Chelsea away. It's one of the biggest games we have all season. So if Perisic, if there's a doubt about his fitness, then I think Conte will be fine with Sessegnon. But that's the only change I could think of. I don't think we'll do anything else. I mean, I know that Longlay's got an injury, so he's out. So the rest of the team picks itself with Spurs. I mean, that's where we are. We've got a very, very strong first 11. And I think that we all thought that Royal, because he's a bit better defensively, would be, if Sterling plays down that side, we might need him there rather than Doherty, who obviously doesn't have the pace. So I think the only change for what we saw last week would be Perisic might come in.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, I definitely agree with HG there. Maybe the only possible or potential change would be Perisic. Then again, Sessegnon had such a good game. Sessegnon's also, peak fitness, as we know. Whereas maybe if you were to trial Perisic, even though we know, even that sort of word seems unfair to Perisic, because we know that he's just going to hit the ground running, to say the word trial. But I feel like Chelsea away might be the toughest game you could possibly, imagine, to put him in for after maybe that sort of injury and whatnot. So I would like to see him come up against Wolves and get 90 minutes against Wolves or something like that, because I feel like he'd be very useful against a very annoying team like that. Whereas Sessegnon, has done well in the past against these sort of one-on-one battles against other English, compatriots, if you know what I mean by that, caller. I think he's done well, in the past against Trent. He's done well in the past against Sterling. He's done well in the past, he's done very good in, one-on-one assignments, I think, against big players, and him up against Reece James, as well as might be Sterling, could be Mason Mount, coming up against him. I feel like Sessegnon might get kind of pumped up for that sort of thing. It might be kind of, really, excited for that sort of situation. And given how well he played, maybe sentimental, but I'd give him the nod. And then Perisic comes in case, we're frustrated, 0-0, 1-0 down situation. You bring in Perisic second half.
I think that my view is I think we'll be unchanged. I think Longley obviously will start to feature for Davis, but ultimately it's Davis's shirt to lose right now, and Longley's injured, so that ain't going to happen this week. Perisic is the only one I would love to put Perisic in the side, but like you say, he's not match sharp. Interestingly, I hung around after the game in the stadium, so I went to see Steve in the Tunnel Club after the last game, and you should have seen the general, what's his name, the Marine putting them through their paces.
Yeah, Ventura, whatever his name is.
Perisic came, walked within a couple of foot of me, taking his shirt off. I mean, that guy is just a walking muscle. He is absolutely ripped. I mean, the physical condition that he's in, his body fat must be next to nothing, absolutely next to nothing. So although he's 33, I wouldn't mind him starting.
He's trying his hardest not to look at. He's trying his hardest not to look at. Yeah, that looks.
I think he takes his shirt off at any opportunity. Actually, Perisic. I think it's one of them. But I'm not sure we'll see any. We'll see any change. HG, what are the key battles in your opinion?
In any game, it's always your central midfield. You've got to earn the platform to play the way you want to play, and because Chelsea do like to keep things tight. Tuchel's quite a conservative manager. They'll want the ball and they'll want to dominate things and just push players forward. But that's always going to be it. You've got to win things in midfield. Any success we've had against Chelsea, which has been pretty rare in the last 30 years, but it has been in those games where we've taken control. The 3-1 win at Wembley a few years ago, we won that midfield battle. And that's kind of why I'm pretty happy that Jorginho is going to play. If it was Conte and Kovacic, I would be a lot more nervous. But I just think that Jorginho, he can be bullied. And as we saw last week, we're 1-0 down against Southampton, who've got 3 in midfield. And yet we were still, just with Højbjerg and Bentancur, able to wrest the game from them. So you have to hope. But yeah, I mean, every battle will be key because they're all good players, right? It's not as if it's a tactical thing. It's about winning those individual battles. But yeah, if you're going to ask me a specific area, then central midfield will always be my answer.
Okay. Jack, any different for you?
I kind of think the wingbacks will be a huge battle in this one, mostly because I think the wingbacks maybe have something to prove. They'll be having much, much tougher tests. Sessegnon or Perisic, regardless, will come up against, like I said, Mason Mount and likely Reece James, which I think is a very tough combination, probably one of the toughest ones you could maybe find. And Reece James, I think, is easily one of the best wingbacks in Europe, as well. So that would be a tough one to come up against. And then in the case of Emerson, who had, in my belief, at least like an 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, if you're being critical sort of performance, against Southampton. I think he's going to see if he can actually, prove it against a much better team. We know he's solid defensively. Can he prove, to be that sort of attacking outlet, or at least, support that he proved to be against Southampton? And I think it was much easy for him to kind of bully on kind of Generpo. I think Generpo is not a great, wing back or really, a fair, kind of opponent. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how, and I think, our Southampton friend even called that one absolutely, to happen. And it'll be interesting to see how Emerson actually does against much tougher tests, because that tougher test will either be Cucurella, which I think would be much tougher than Chilwell, at least for, defensively, because I could see Emerson burning, Chilwell with a lot of pace and, kind of energy. But Cucurella, maybe a different story there. So I would say the wingbacks, actually, just because I think, Collar, the wingbacks have a lot to prove. I think, if they have another good game, maybe you keep Emerson for the third one. Maybe you think Sessegnon deserves a spot. So I would keep the wingbacks. I think that's the battle.
I mean, when they match up, in effect, 3-5-2 versus 3-5-2.
That looks good on paper.
Sorry, not 3-5-2. What am I saying? with wing backs, it's going to make a huge difference on the head-to-heads are so important, and I think the wing backs as part of Conte's system are so important. Charlie, who worries you in the Spurs team, and what do you think the key matchups are? Wing backs, do you agree?
I think the main worry is the likes of Harry Kane and Son, and obviously Kulusevski as well. Obviously, we are very good defensively. Thiago Silva, Koulibaly is probably going to be Aspilicueta player as well because he's the captain and for his experience. They're going to have a big job on their hands. For a team like us that don't tend to score too many goals, it's vital that we don't go a goal behind, because I think if we do go one down, we're going to struggle to win the game. So I just don't see us having enough goals in the side. So it's very much important that we keep it as tight as possible. So the likes of, even if Reece James maybe even plays right centre back to combat Son potentially, I think, the matchups could buy up against Son or Silva up against Kane or whatever it ends up being. Those matchups are going to be crucial. Don't get caught on the half turn. Don't allow them space in behind and whatnot. As Jack said, I think the wing backs is going to be interesting as well in the system that both teams set up with. The wing backs are so crucial to your attacking play. So who's going to have the better down that side? And I think also Eric Dyer, who's someone that's been criticised a lot, but I think under Conte is improving as a player for sure. It's going to be a tricky afternoon for him as well. Up against the likes of Sterling, Mount. Maybe not so much Havertz, but there are options there. Tricky players like Pulisic could potentially come off the bench as well. Guys that could cause issues. Not necessarily that have been world beaters at Chelsea necessarily, but guys that have still got enough about them to come off the bench and have got that quality to pull something out of the bag. So I think the main matchups are going to be, as I said, Silva and Kane, Koulibaly, Son and whatnot, keeping Kulusevski quiet. And then obviously at the other end of the pitch as well, how the Spurs back line deals with kind of the pace and directness of Raheem Sterling, kind of Mason Mount drifting between the lines, and whether it's Havertz or Broja, just a bit of physicality up there as well. But I think this, from a Spurs perspective, there might not be many better chances than this to get a win at Stamford Bridge. In terms of the fact that, it's right at the start of the season. Chelsea have had a bit of a disjointed pre-season. Didn't play well against Everton. We're kind of still finding our groove a little bit. Spurs seem to be a lot more settled. Conte's obviously drilled them in pre-season and whatnot. And I think this is an opportunity for Spurs that, you'd obviously take a draw before the game's kicked off, of course. But I think this is an opportunity for Tottenham to come to Stamford Bridge and then really lay a marker down, show that they sort of mean business this season, potentially could be the best of the rest. And just to get over that mental block of coming to Stamford Bridge and almost knowing you're going to lose. And I think it would be a massive shift in the club's DNA potentially as well, in terms of knowing that actually, we can actually go to these places and win. And if we're going to, be taken seriously and look to close the gap, because you've got the manager to do it, you've got the stadium to do it, you've got the infrastructure, there's money there, Conte's been back. This kind of all the ingredients for this recipe are there. It's now just putting it together. And Spurs, this is a golden opportunity. But then, having said that, Chelsea always tend to do well against Tottenham. The game always seems to be raised. But yeah, for Spurs, this is a massive opportunity for sure. And I think I'm never too worried as a Chelsea fan heading into a game against Spurs, given how good our record's been. But I think now we look at Conte and you look at what's being built potentially there. This is probably the most worried I would be in a number of years going into a game against Spurs.
Well, let me throw this up. So this is most goals. Top scoring teams in the Premier League in 2022, the calendar year, with Antonio Conte's front three included, and you can see them there. So Tottenham top with 51 goals, Man City second 50, Liverpool 46, Chelsea 34. So there's the graphic. So Kane, Son and Kulusevski. As many goals as you're.
And you have to remember, Kulusevski didn't start a game till mid-February. So if that's all of 2022, Chelsea had a 3-4 league game head start before we even got those three going. So it's incredible that those three have done as well as they've done. I mean, genuinely, even though the team as a whole is much better, the fact that those front three work so well together we're very, very fortunate to have them.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impressive stat, isn't it? This was the team the last time we went to the Bridge.
Oh no, we don't want to talk about this. Oh.
Our favorite in midfield, caller. Our favorites in there.
Harold Winks in midfield. Oh my God. I mean, it's fair to say we've moved on a little bit since then, isn't it, Jack?
You could definitely say that. Oh, geez, that is an absolute howler of a team to really look at. Now, I mean, as well as also, it really just showed, why Conte was, if anything, Collar, he already had replaced, his hair after losing it. I feel like, a game like that, picking an 11 like that probably would have made him lose his hair again. That back four of Tanganga. But was it as well, like just so much defensive back four, defensive four-man midfield with Bergwijn, who had, no offense to him, a fantastic game against Leicester City, but, was just riding the hope that he could somehow do that against Chelsea, the team we never beat. I don't know. It was a howler of a team. I'm surprised Conte has even, come out of that, still the Spurs manager. And if anything, I would say what he was being paid at the time was probably, fair due, considering that's what he had available to him. So, yeah, we've come long story short, we've come very much a long way, Collar. And I would say the one player, I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, and I've seen it in the comments by King Hoddle, the one player as good as Koulibaly is, and maybe even could be sort of a better technical player than Rudiger was. I am happy not to see Rudiger any longer. That guy, I think, was sort of like the Grim Reaper of our team.
He had that number, didn't he? Absolutely.
Alonso and him, I thought, just both were just they seemed to gain superpowers sort of against us. And in the case of Rudiger as well, I feel like he had that sort of Richarlison sort of kind of aspect as well, where like nobody likes Rudiger except for, when he's on your team, sort of player. And I think even Spurs fans kind of felt that way, where when we all got Richarlison, Spurs fans were really upset. Oh, he's done this. Oh, he's such a, shit house, etc. I feel like the same thing was like with Rudiger. It's like I would take Rudiger and Richarlison as long as we don't play those guys, any longer, because they just cause us absolute nightmares. And so, yeah, Rudiger, I'm happy to no longer see. Despite how good, Koulibaly is, I think Koulibaly's unbelievable, but he will be nowhere near the shit house I imagine that Rudiger was, to Spurs.
Well, I can imagine that. Now, before the winning 2018, where Dele famously upset all of the Chelsea fans that day, this was the previous team that won at the Bridge. There we go. 2-1, in 1990.
Was it just Caller and I that were born when this happened? I mean, I'm not sure Charlie was.
I mean, that was the year I started supporting Spurs. I was 8 years old. So, yeah, I mean, look at that. I remember those players. And obviously, Naeem, essentially, Howes and Lineker. Yeah, obviously, yeah. Mabbutt, Paul Walsh, Pat Van Den Houw, Welsh legend. So, yeah. But it's a long time ago, Charlie. There's lots of reasons for you to be quite optimistic, really, going into this game. But yeah, it's shocking, really. That was the Chelsea team. Besson, he had the curly hair, didn't he?
Wow, Clive Wilson played for Chelsea. I don't remember that.
And this is it, yeah. Well, 3 of the Chelsea 11 also played for Spurs: Besson, Clive Wilson, and Graham Roberts. So there you go.
When did Besson play for Spurs?
I don't know, but it's in my run sheet, so I'm assuming I'm glad you didn't even pick up the fact I was reading it. I'm assuming John, the researcher, is here. Maybe he's in the chat and he can.
Maybe it was an Intertoto Cup game where we didn't really care what was going on.
I think he was probably there at some point. But yeah, there we go. Charlie, we've been doing top 6 predictions. We've been asking. We had a Southampton fan, obviously, on last week to give us his. We'd love yours. Before you do say that, 177 people watching right now. Please do smash that like button. Really helps us out. Costs you nothing. Takes a second. We appreciate you watching the show. Smash that like button. Charlie, your top 6 predictions. Have I had yours, HG, or you were away? You were away.
I was away.
So I'm going to get your top 6 as well, but guess first, Charlie. Hit me with the best shot.
In order, yeah.
Whatever way you like it, mate.
Spurs are first.
Do you know what? I'll just go with it in order. Why not? Otherwise, it's a bit of a cop out, isn't it? So I'll go City to win the title, Liverpool second, Chelsea third, Spurs fourth, and then Arsenal, Man United really toss up. I'll probably say Arsenal fifth, United sixth. Basically the same top six as last season. I don't think there's going to be too many changes, really. I think the gap might get a little bit closer, but ultimately, I think Chelsea will get themselves together and have enough to hold on to that third spot. And I think Spurs have got more than enough about them to stay ahead of Arsenal and keep that last Champions League spot. So, yeah, I think same top six as last season for me.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of Spurs or Arsenal? Maybe going into the season, maybe
probably say Spurs. But again, both clubs have got a tendency to kind of implode at any point. In terms of kind of, I mean, Chelsea have got a tendency as well, to potentially go on a run of games without winning. But I think, I guess Spurs and Arsenal are always the classic ones that, you think, oh, they've got kind of a wobble in them or something big to go wrong. But I think Spurs definitely, this is an opportunity for Spurs to cement themselves as kind of a top four side for the next few years now, for sure. But I think Chelsea, just with the know-how, experience, probably slightly better players in general, not necessarily in all positions, but probably a slightly better squad. I think just got enough to hold Spurs off for that third place. So I think Spurs will be close to third, but just give Chelsea the nod on that one.
There you are. HG, your top six?
My turn. Like before last week, I said Liverpool were going to win the league, and then Thiago got injured, and I'm like, I don't know anymore. I feel like both Liverpool and City, like again, they have a very, very good first 11, and after that, you start to wonder. So I'll stick with it. Like I think every year I say that City are going to focus on the Champions League more than anything else because that's the thing they really want. So I'll go Liverpool, City. I think Spurs, considering the strike force we have, should be enough for third. Fourth, I mean, now that Chelsea have started buying players, I'm more tempted to go there because Tuchel's a much better manager than Arteta, and that would be enough for me. Like if you struggle to, like Arsenal will win a load of games because they won a load of games last year and just came short, but they should win a fair few. I would put Chelsea fourth, Arsenal would be fifth, again very close, and sixth. I mean, I don't rate Ten Hag at all, so.
You've never mentioned that, HG. You've never mentioned it.
I don't say it that often. I just don't. I don't know. United are so far behind what they need to be doing, and they haven't done anything yet in the window, really. So, yeah, if it's not United, who would be sixth? That's a good question. I don't know, but
maybe West Ham. I don't know.
The thing with West Ham is that if they do go on a run in the Conference League, you'd start to worry there. Like all these games that these top teams have to play, I think this season would be one of those occasions where if you're not in Europe, you have a good chance of putting games together and finishing somewhere. So
I think West Ham.
Who's got the best set of strikers outside the sides that are in Europe? That would be a thing for me. But I think Man United will struggle. I do, because I don't think they really know how they want to play. I don't think they have the players to do what Ten Hag wants them to do, and they may all be worse than they were under Rangnick. I don't expect much from Man United at all.
There's an Eredivisie tax, where Eredivisie players don't really do very well, and in fact, I think they're kind of the most notorious for not doing well in the Premier League when transitioning directly, from the Eredivisie to the Premier League. Is that the same, do you think, for managers, HG? Do you think like a manager going from the Eredivisie, to, the Premier League is like a similar adjustment?
Who was Ajax? The last successful Ajax manager before Ten Hag was what? De Boer. He did rubbish. Wherever he's been, pretty much. He was rubbish in Italy. He was rubbish at Palace. So, I lived in Holland, so I feel like I understand the kind of Dutch mentality. I know Dutch football pretty well. I just when I watched Ten Hag, he gave an interview, and I didn't know too much about him. But when it looked like Spurs might be interested, I was like, I'm going to learn a bit more about him. And I just thought that's not someone I would want managing a football team. He's very quite dour. He comes from the countryside. Like those things don't necessarily matter, but to me they would.
Not charismatic at all.
No, I don't think so. And so, do I think that if he got his players, his 11 would be good? Absolutely. But I look at Ten Hag and I think that 2019 team that probably should have beaten us in the Champions League and got to the final. A lot of those players were Ajax players that had come through playing together, and there was a few others like Tadic, but most of them was just Ajax had been there through and through, and he rode that wave of a very, very good system and very, very good players that worked really well together. And so I wonder how much of that was down to him and how much of it was down to the players, because like in the Dutch league every season it's Ajax or PSV or Feyenoord pretty much, and like whoever rides the crest of a wave will get there. So I don't know. I don't know if there's an actual Eredivisie tax per se, because they do have obviously some very good players that make it across, but there's this. It's a very, very big jump in quality to go from that league. If you master the Dutch league, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that instinctively you're going to come over to the Premier League and be just as good.
And we've seen that before. We've seen that so many times before. What is scandalous, there's 185 people watching this broadcast right now. There's only 63 likes, which is shocking. So I left you to it. I thought, I just won't look at it tonight. I can't believe I just looked at it. It's 63 likes. Come on, people, smash that like button. There's 185 of you watching. We can get the show to over 200, 300 people watching if you hit the like button. So please do so. We appreciate you watching. Send in your super chats. Any questions you've got for Charlie, we'll put them to him or Jack or HG. Yeah, I mean this is good news if this is true from Mr. Muir. Napoli and Tottenham reached agreement for Tanguy Ndombele with loan to buy option. I'm hoping that is right, Paul, and you're not just pulling my pants down. But yeah, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. You don't want to end Ndombele or a Celso, do you, Charlie?
Nah, definitely not. That Ndombele news is true, because Fabrizio's just tweeted it out like a minute ago.
Oh, really?
Agreement is reached. Yeah, loan with buy option. So that's going to happen soon.
I love the idea. Agreement is reached. Like Levy's like, yes, whatever offer comes in, yes. They really had to negotiate that one.
I think there's a player there, HG.
I think there is a player there, but it just hasn't worked out for him.
Yeah. A top player, but it's.
I wonder who Napoli's manager is. That's
Spalletti.
Spalletti, yeah.
Spalletti.
Okay.
I feel like he could do well in the Serie A, but we're happy as Spurs fans just to see him go. That's for sure. And I doubt I don't know. Collar, what do you think? I think we're probably still paying 60% of those wages. I would imagine 70%. I think we're just betting on him having a good season with Spalletti and then Napoli being silly enough to trigger that buy option. I think that's what we're likely betting on it. In fact, I bet we're probably paying a lot of those wages just to maybe make Napoli silly enough to,
I don't know because I don't know what his actual wage is. It's quoted as 200,000 a week, but that's quite. I mean, the Tottenham contracts are very much incentive driven. So is it really 200k a week? It might be 120, in which case they might be taking 100k of it or whatever. I couldn't be optimistic. Who knows? But the reality is that gone.
Even if he moves there permanently,
we're working through the list.
Yeah, but even if he moves there permanently, Spurs will be paying a fair chunk of those wages because we will still owe it. Like Ndombele's not going to give those wages up. So we'll have to come to some kind of subsidised arrangement. But it's nice that he gets the chance. I don't know how well the Napoli fans, who are super passionate, will take to him. But Italian football suits him perfectly because it is a lot slower, and we all know he's got ability. I mean, he did prove it for Spurs, but it just meant the whole team had to be based around him to be able to do it. And when you get to the highest levels, that's just not possible.
It's an interesting one. Udogie obviously is a done deal, so we've had a here you go from Fabrizio on that one. And he's already in the country. Oh no, he's not. Monday in the country. Be unveiled Tuesday morning, hopefully. So there you go. Udinese on loan next season. HG, thoughts on that?
He's one for next season. I mean, obviously he's highly rated, so I'm happy that we've got him. It's the same with Brian Hill. It's the same with Pape Matar. Like you want them to come good at some point. So I like to see Spurs being proactive and planning for the future. But that is what it is. I mean, we're not going to see him for the next, we're not going to see him for 12 months and maybe longer, depending on what happens with Perisic and Sessegnon. Because if Perisic's got a 2-year contract, and if we're not planning on selling Sessegnon, then Udoji's not going to come in next season either. It's a good thing that you do those to plan for the future, but he's still so young that 2 seasons on loan wherever would be good for him.
Jack, have you done any more research into him since we last spoke?
I think he's basically the second or third most productive wingback behind Perisic and that Teo Hernandez guy, if I'm not mistaken, in the Serie A. So when you really look at it that way, as much as we know Pape Matar, Brian Hill were like investments for the future, very talented players on paper, etc. I mean, Udoji, you could say, has more like actual numbers that, would prove that maybe he could actually make some sort of, effort, or at least some sort of, trial into this team. Because I think compared to maybe Hill Messi or the likes of Pape Matar, he has, a bit more numbers, to back his sort of game. He's also kind of fits that Conte bill. I think he's, 6 foot or like, around 6 feet, looks big, a lot bigger on paper than even, the height, sort of metric gives him. I think too, from what I saw from like, some stats, as well as I decided to watch 45 minutes of him, Collar in like a certain game that some people said he played really well in. From what I can tell is that we seem to be going after these wingbacks that are very pacey and are able to, take it past their man with absolute ease, and also have maybe a bit of strength, as well, which is basically Jed Spence's, sort of bill. We knew that he was strong. We knew he's a good dribbler. We know that he's fast. Udoji is pretty much the same thing, except he definitely had a lot more end product, I would say, last season. And also Udinese, I believe they went from like scoring 43 goals, I think, before he was playing in that team regularly, to I think the last season he played with them regularly, they scored like 15 or 20 more goals, this season, which is obviously, a huge bump up. And I think they bumped up like 2 or 3 more places in the table as well. So clearly he was also kind of carrying that team at certain stages.
My question for you, HG, is how many puns do you think our run sheet workers will get in around Destiny Doji over the next 18 months?
Well, not too many this year, but if he does stick around next year, because it'd be under 21, so he'll be valuable for the Premier League. He won't cost us spot in the squad. But yeah, there are. I mean, I know Destiny is like his middle name, right? Like he actually has a Nigerian or an African, actual first name. But it's I don't know. I mean, when I think of Destiny, I think of flipping Destiny's Child, and I'm not sure that would work with any of them. So don't get me to do any puns. That's for sure.
Shout out THFC Till I Die, sending a super sticker. Appreciate your support. Absolutely. Big up to you. It's an interesting one. So Ndebele and Lo Celso gone. Winks and Reguilon are training at different times to the rest of the squad, according to a very big report. I think it's in the Evening Standard. Do you think that's acceptable, given that Winks and Reguilon have done not a lot wrong apart from not being good enough, HG?
Acceptable. I mean, that's how things work. Like, I mean, I've watched the All or Nothing documentary, and you see Aubameyang like training by himself, and it just looks pathetic. Like it's created this one-on-one training you'd think would be a good thing, and it's just really, really sad to see someone treated that way. So, I mean, like they both know. I think it's more just a case of we want you gone, and you have to understand that. I'm sure both players know it, but I'm sure they're like. I think I said this in the week that, like, if I'm Reguilon, I'm not accepting any old permanent deal. I'll go on loan. He wants regular football. We'll see what happens. But if it's someone like Brighton that says, yeah, we want you to replace Cucurella, I think Reguilon's probably thinking, well, no, I want to use whatever team to put myself in the shop window. So maybe I'll go back to Spain and play for a side that's, there or thereabouts for the Champions League places. Like he could go back to Sevilla or he could play somewhere else. So I don't know if we'll get a permanent deal for him. kind of the same with Winks, but yeah, I mean it's not a great look. But I guess if Conte wants his squad to be together and have that togetherness, you don't want anyone in that area who might be somewhat negative about what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, we had Gary Stevens, you may be aware of Gary Stevens, Tottenham Hotspur legend, England right back, on the pod a few months ago. And he'll be on the pod very soon as well with Brendan, I believe, again. And he said this is exactly what Terry Venables did to him to force him to go to Portsmouth in 1990. So it's hardly a new tactic to force players out, Jack. But does it feel right? And Charlie, I'll come to you next with the question: Who was the last person forced out of Chelsea like in that way, Jack?
I think it does feel right. I think if Conte believes that these players would be a distraction to what he's trying to achieve, you could imagine that if he doesn't see any future with these sort of players, why would he bother training them or having to stop any sort of session to teach them something or to correct something that they're doing, also as well, in a lot of cases it's not even just the footballing ability, it's just the mental that Conte just doesn't believe in them for. And then it could be the case that if they're hanging around the squad, could they quote unquote infect kind of other players in the squad with maybe a bad attitude or maybe not as much of a forthright sort of kind of all in sort of mentality for what we're trying to achieve this season. So I think it's actually the right sort of way to go about it, if you ask me, caller. In the case of Reguilón, I think we're being a bit unfair if we were to say he wasn't good enough. I think he was good enough. I think he had a pretty good season under Jose, in his debut season. I remember, what was it? Like even Ali Gold said something like Spurs weren't even thinking about buying a left back that season. They were thinking, maybe it was, just a toss, just to get, a left back. Think about it. We would have had Ben Davies as the left back that entire season, as Jose Mourinho. I think we should be very thankful that we actually did have Sergio Reguilón instead of Ben Davies in that, Jose Mourinho team, because that Jose Mourinho team already struggled as is, to create chances and to be able to get forward. If we had Ben Davies as, the attacking fullback in that team, we would have been absolutely screwed. So I think Sergio Reguilón, at the end of the day, he'll give us a good fee, caller. He'll probably get us, a loan option with a, good option to buy 20 million. I think there's still a good player in there. I think there's a very serviceable player in there. I think he's a good fullback, for most teams. He could probably even be good in the Premier League. I think he proved that he's, for the most part, Premier League quality even. So I think Reguilón is actually not even a gamble for most teams. I think Winks is actually a gamble, and I think you and I would agree with that, caller. Winks, on the other hand, has only played 213, 15 games in a 8, 9, 10-year career, whatever it's been for Spurs. I think Højbjerg has already halved, his entire, total matches played. And Højbjerg's been here for 2 seasons, and which really shows, how little actually Winks has ever made, any sort of crack into this team. And when you look at it, caller, if you're going to spend 10, 15 million on Winks for a guy that's only, like I said, played 215 games for a club over a span of 8 years, like what sort of player are you getting there? I genuinely don't know, because it's a
very, very average one.
Maybe average, but just a player who hasn't even played very much, and a player who hasn't obviously experienced any other culture, experienced any other club, experienced any other dynamic. He's always been coddled. I think I'm worried for Winks about where his career will go. I think we'd be unfair to Reguilón. I think Reguilón will be totally fine. I think we'd have no problem selling him. And I think we'll have no problem recuperating some sort of fee, back for him. I think he was still a decent player for us, considering it would have been Ben Davies or Reguilón, under the Jose season. And I would much rather have had Reguilón.
No, I'm in complete agreement with you. We've got a little bit. I'll offer the option to you, Charlie. We've got a little bit more to cover in the run sheet, but it isn't Chelsea centric. So it's up to you. You can hang out with us for a bit, or if you need to go.
Well, I'm easy either way.
Oh,
yeah.
So let's do match predictions first, and then we'll talk about the remaining Spurs news. So score predictions, the big one. 100% record. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say we're going to win at Stamford Bridge, which would be monumental, to be honest, given how many times we've won there recently. But I think we're gonna get a 3-1 win. Charlie, I'm going to go to you, and then to you two other gents.
I'll probably say a 2-1 Chelsea. I think Spurs will definitely score, but I think we'll probably add for the home crowd as well, just enough to get us through. I'll go 2-1, but I could easily see a score draw happening as well, like a 1-1 or something like that. But I'll just go 2-1
Would you take
Chelsea.
That, Charlie, by the way?
Yeah,
Would you take a draw as a decent result?
I think so, given the form we're in start of the season. Like, at the end of the day, losing the second game of the season for either side is not exactly a total disaster because it's so early on, but it's not the fact it's more the sort of the psychological damage it could potentially do. So I think for me, just the 2-1 Chelsea, but could see a 1-1 draw quite easily happening as well.
Okay, HG.
The easy answer is 1-1. Both teams are good enough to score. So I want to be a bit more positive from a Spurs point of view. Like, I do think our team is better. I think it's more set. And I think it knows what it wants to do. So whether it can, I worry about Sterling actually playing centrally because I think he would have Dyer. If he's down the sides, I think we're better capable of dealing with him. But all right, 2-0 Spurs.
Okay, Jack.
I feel like it's tough to see this being a high-scoring game. I feel like Tuchel rarely lets in a lot of goals. You know, he gets in a lot of clean sheets. So does Conte. So I feel like anything more than 3 goals total would be pretty surprising. I'm going to go 2-1 Spurs, so the opposite of Charlie. I'm going to go 2-1 Spurs. Even though 1-1, actually, if you were to make a bet, I think HG's would be a good bet.
Would you all take it? Charlie, you said you'd take a draw. HG, draw, good result, obviously, for you.
You can't lose to your rivals, and as much as Chelsea and us are both looking to be something better than what we are, they're clearly a rival. So I think we'd all take a draw, clearly.
Jack, draw, take a draw.
Oh, I'd love a Desmond, a 2-2. A good game. More than the 3 goals I anticipated. That'd be glorious.
Who taught you that, Jack?
I'll take that.
I don't know. I think maybe somehow I learned it when I was a lot younger. I guess. Yeah, I knew that term.
It's not an Irish.
I guess my middle name is Desmond as well. So there you go. My middle name is Desmond. So maybe that's how I remembered.
That sounds exactly like something that your Dave Harris would say. Definitely.
Take a Desmond. I'll take a Desmond.
I like a Desmond. Okay, let's talk about Brian Hill. Apparently, he's looking to be linked with Valencia on loan. Jack, sticking with you. Brian Hill, happy to see him go on loan to Valencia. Spanish League again. Just seems, by the way, let us know what your score predictions in the chat. I know some of you had. There's 180 odd of you watching. Let's have 180 predictions. Jack, tell us your thoughts on Hill. Do you want to see him go out to Spain on loan?
Sad to see my Hill Messi go if he were to go. Do love him, but I feel like if he were to go, I think that'd probably be clever for Spurs if they were to bring in another forward player of some kind, whether it be attacking midfielder, another winger, of some kind. I think that'd be totally fine if they were to swap out Hill with someone just better or more proven. I think I'd accept that. If we were to get rid of Hill and then not, really replace him with anybody, I'd find that a bit silly, if you ask me, because I think we are going to be going into a season for once where, like, Charlie just said, caller, who knows, Spurs could be playing 60 plus games, going into next season. And we might need, Hill for the odd game when we just need to rest more than 2 or 3 players in that front line, and I think, as much as it might not be the best for Hill's development, it could be good just to keep him around just for the sake of he is, I think good enough as, a backup third choice sort of, player. And as well as that he does play well through the middle. We've seen him, kind of be comfortable, playing through the middle before. And, genuinely just would love to keep that hairdo as well as that mustache around in the squad, so I would be quite sad to see him go. And also him going over to Gattuso's Valencia. I just don't know if that's going to be good for his development. Almost just might be better just keeping him, around, at Spurs, keep any Spurs player away from Gattuso's teams. That's what I would say. And then on top of that, if we were to send him on loan. I'd rather he go to a Premier League club, or at least to a club where there's a good enough manager there that he would actually get, some good development. Where Gattuso, absolutely not.
Hill for you, HG. Would you like him to stay?
I'd keep him around, absolutely. He counts as under 21, so he doesn't take a squad spot. So, there's no downside to us keeping him around. Like, do we want to make another team? Sorry? But there's no downside to us, right? Like,
it could be long term.
Well, yeah, but you can let players go out on loan and then they get injured and do nothing. Like, I'd rather he learned how to play. Like, if he's ever going to be a success at Spurs under Conte, he needs to be training under Conte. He's not going to do it otherwise. Like, Valencia don't play the way that we do. So I don't think there's any downside to Spurs to keep him around. There might be a downside to Brian because he might want to get out and play some football because that's what he loves doing. But I think from our perspective, it doesn't cost us anything to keep him. So it's the same with Pape Sarr. They both count as under 21 for the league games. That's most likely when they're going to be used. So we keep him around.
Dave Harris is still banging the drum, HG. Dreadful purchase.
David Harris doesn't like anyone. He just doesn't like anyone. I mean, any purchase that Spurs have ever made, if it's between 20 and 30 million, he doesn't like it. If it's over 30 million, he's okay with it unless they're crap and then he doesn't like it. It's all a bit.
I'll have David Harris, had Brian Hill played, I believe, 120 more minutes, he would have equaled the average amount of minutes that Lamela had played per season in the Premier League for Spurs in the course of the last 4 or 5 seasons. So there you go. As much as people love to throw Lamela in, it's like, oh my gosh, what a loss. It's like we lost a guy that averaged 700 minutes for Spurs, per season in the Premier League. That guy couldn't barely break 1,000 if he tried.
Yep. Charlie, have you got any memories of Eric Lamela?
The only one is obviously that Rabona goal against Arsenal, isn't it? Other than that,
unless you work in hospitals, Charlie, there aren't any other reasons to remember Eric Lamela.
I can't really remember too many others. I mean, he popped up the odd good goal here or there. He had a couple of decent performances in him, but I think he is one of them that I suppose is very much sort of more promise than kind of good end product in the end. I think he was someone that could have been decent, but it didn't really work out. So I think from a Spurs perspective, I think losing Lamela was a big deal, really.
No, I don't think, given the amount of minutes he gave us, was a big deal. Zaniolo has gone quiet. Apparently, Jose wants to keep him, and Roma want big bucks for him. So all quiet on that front. And Memphis Depay seems to be off to Juve. Surprised we're not getting after that. Charlie, surprised you're not getting after that. A bit of Memphis action.
Yeah, I'd have been quite happy to have Memphis. I think a very talented player, versatile across the front line, can score goals. I think it would have fitted in quite nicely for Chelsea, but for whatever reason, obviously, Tuchel prefers Aubameyang, so that's kind of the one that we're going for. And I think Memphis Depay is pretty much going to sign for Juventus, 2-year contract, and they're just sort of finalising the details now. So yeah, but it's a bit of a shame, I suppose. Surprised we weren't on that a bit more, but yeah, can't get them all.
And surprised. I mean, I know you said HG, that's who you'd bring in as a successor to our other Flying Dutchman who's left us now.
They're very similar players to me. They're both comfortable playing with their back to goal. They're both good running at people. They both got. I mean, I know Boban didn't really do it for Spurs, but when you see him play with Depay, they work pretty well together. I think Depay has no interest in playing in England. I think after what happened at Man United, he's pretty much done with that, and so he's done France, he's done Spain, Italy's next. So it will work out well for him. But again, how much is he going to play with Vlahovic being the main man there? It's an interesting one. But he's definitely a good player. Wherever he goes, the team that gets him will have a more successful season with him in their squad.
Where would he have fitted at Spurs, though?
What do you mean, where would he have fitted?
I'd be on the bench, wouldn't he, most of the time, surely?
Well, but same with Richarlison, same with anyone. I mean, our front three is so set that whoever you buy, they are going to be rotational pieces. And I think Depay... I mean, the issue that Spurs have more than anything is that we're looking for someone who's left-footed that likes to play on the right. right? That's what we're looking for. We've got Richarlison who can come from the left onto using his right foot, who can play centre forward, but we're looking for someone who's in effect a Kulusevski clone is what we want. And I don't think Depay would do that. But I think if you were to play Depay in the Spurs system the way we are right now, then I would have him as kind of like a Kane kind of, he can get the ball with his back to goal. He can find a pass. He's very good at linking things together. But they're all the things that I used to like about Bergwijn. So it would be weird for Conte to not want one and then want the other. Doesn't make much sense to me.
I mean, it's an interesting one. John Carl's got a good comment. How funny is Aubameyang turning out? Gave him away for free, paid his wages, and now Barca are planning to send him for 15 million. Is that what you're paying for him? 15 million, Charlie? Is that what's
I think it's reported to be about 25 million euros, so it's around 20 million pounds. But I don't think Chelsea would pay that much for him. I'd say if a deal was going to be done, I reckon something could be done for about 15 million, which, given the current market, 15 million is not exactly an expensive purchase.
No.
And there are a number of teams that need strikers. I mean, that's the crazy thing. There are a number of teams that, I was thinking about Man United this week, that what Man United always did to stay successful was to basically buy the best striker in the Premier League that they could get their hands on. Right, and whereas it used to be a top four, but they went out. I remember when they bought Andy Cole from Newcastle. It was like the best team in the league buying the second best team in the league's best striker, and they could just go and do that. And this year, there's no one in the Premier League. Richarlison would have been that person. He would have been the player that they looked around the Premier League and thought, this guy scores goals. He's a centre forward. And
they bought Van Nistelrooy as well from Arsenal, didn't they? I mean.
Well, Van Nistelrooy came from PSV, but you mean Van Persie? Van Persie came
Sorry, Van Persie, yeah.
But no, it's kind of what the best teams do. It's what Bayern do in Germany all the time. They buy their rivals' best players because they can. And Man United now are so far behind in being an attractive destination for players that it's going to be weird. But strikers, if I'm Chelsea, if I'm spending 85 million on Fofana and 60 odd million on Cucurella, 15 million on Aubameyang is a no-brainer. Absolutely a no-brainer, even at 33 or 34 or whatever he is.
Yeah, he's a good player. He is a good player. Other news, we've made some appointments within our coaching academy. So I've seen Defoe's back. How happy are you to see Defoe back? Jack, let's go to you.
It's nice to see that Spurs are putting actual figureheads, within the academy system that, not only, the players that are already within the academy, that can look up to and, be able to, see as living examples of Spurs success, but also players that eventually will be in that academy that maybe, because there are a lot of moves that I think are made between academies. You might get somebody, from West Ham, you might get somebody from Chelsea's academy, put them into yours. It's nice to see that we have the likes of, Jermaine Defoe, and I think we'll talk about the other one as well, that's been hired too. But, it's good to see that we have a very, I don't know, maybe it's wrong to say this, but a very Hollywood-esque, kind of Spurs academy. Yeah, and Jermaine, seeing those two together, I think it's very cool. It also just speaks to how much of a fallout Yaya Toure clearly had with Man City, that, he's now seen as this guy that really loves Spurs and really wants to develop Spurs players and teach them all that he's learned and everything. It really just shows how much of a fallout he had over at Man City. So it's nice to see that Spurs have such notable figures, to look up to in the academy, maybe compared to other academies.
Charlie, I've got this question. Gov is a bit of a legend, one of our patrons and all-round nice guy. Forget the blue face. He's a real good person. How is Tuchel supposed to shut down Koulibaly, Kane and Son? That would be your task, I guess.
That's
how do you do that?
Kind of the key to the game, basically, is to keep Spurs' front line quiet and nullify the threats. I think it's very much just a case of, just doing the basics right, not taking too many risks at the back. I know a lot of teams like to pass it out from the back. We do that, but, just making the right decisions in the key moments. The rather than playing a risky pass, just boot it out. It's simple as that. I think it's just got to be keep it tight. Try and nullify that counter attack. If we need to make tactical fouls on the halfway line, take bookings and whatnot, then do that. And it's just not allowing them much time on the ball, making sure we're not leaving a lot of space in behind. Try not to make too many mistakes. And it all sounds quite straightforward, but obviously when you're actually in the game and you're doing it, it's not quite as simple. But I probably those are the main points really. Those are the main sort of areas I think that if we could do those things right, then we've got a very good chance of getting a positive result.
Question from one of our viewers. Can you ask Charlie who the backup centre-backs are?
Yeah, so first choice is pretty much, Silva, Koulibaly, and then we've got Azpilicueta playing at the moment. But then you've got, obviously, Cucurella can fill in at left centre-back. Ampadu is probably going to go on loan, but he can still do it. He could do a job there. We've got Trevor Chalobah also. Those three. Reece James can also play right centre-back if needed. Deputised there at times last season, can do a solid job there. But also, if Fofana were to come in, then we kind of that makes a big difference to the pool of depth. So would have Fofana and say Fofana, Koulibaly, Silva, and you've got Chalobah, Azpilicueta, and Cucurella as the backups. So if Fofana can come in, then it adds a bit of depth. But we've got a couple, but I think we definitely need one more.
Interesting stuff. Tuchel talks about nullifying the counter attack at the source rather than trying to deal with it once it started. That's probably good advice, I would imagine.
Chelsea will look to have possession of the ball and keep it. I mean, that's the biggest thing. It sounds obvious, but if you want to stop Spurs scoring, you stop them having the ball. Because, I don't think teams look at Spurs' side and think there's a ball winner in there, really. Like, Bentancur can do it, Højbjerg can do it, but they can get outnumbered quite easily. And Chelsea's success over the years against Spurs, certainly in recent years, even Lampard went to Spurs and won a couple of games quite handily, is that they take those attacking midfielders that used, whether it was Mount or even Willian at one point, and just bring them more central. So you've got 4 against whatever Spurs have got. They could easily do that with Mount and Havertz and leave Sterling kind of central. That's probably what I would do if I was Chelsea. Leave Sterling up against Dyer and just try and keep the ball as much as possible. That to me is how you stop Spurs. You've just got to stop us having the ball.
Well, and that's easier said than done, isn't it? It'll be an interesting one to witness. Please do smash that like button. We're on 92 likes for 182 people watching. There's been more than that during the show, so please do smash that like button. Torre, etc. We've got I've got 185 people watching. There's 2 things already to announce. Number one, tune in 6:06 tomorrow. I'm on at 8:20 with Robbie Savage and Chris Sutton, that ex-Chelsea striker. So that'll be entertaining, hopefully. And the second thing is we're doing a post-match show special for Chelsea, as it's such a massive game. So the team will be here live on YouTube immediately after the show. Look out for the show notification. Subscribe, hit the bell. You won't miss a thing. And check that out, because we will be getting good result or bad result, your instant reaction, your views. I can imagine it will be really highs or really lows, and I'll absolutely be tuning in for that one. I think it'll be fantastic. But we've been going an hour and 48 minutes. There's 190 of you watching. We appreciate it. Charlie, tell us about your channel, mate, and this is your opportunity to pitch to any viewers that might want to come over and see your stuff.
Yeah, so basically, got a channel with a mate of mine called the Blues Brothers. Basically just covers all things Chelsea, essentially. So match previews, match reaction, transfer news, get guests on and stuff, etc. Journalists or whoever's up for coming on, we get them on. But yeah, that's pretty much that. That's the best place to go. On heading towards 2K subscribers, so not too far off. So yeah, guys, if you've enjoyed hearing what I've got to say and you want to check out a bit more of it, or you just want to do me a favor and be nice, then head over to the Blues Brothers channel. It's the Chelsea one. It's pretty obvious to find, and just hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. And then otherwise, just if you're interested in more footballing thoughts from myself, just you can give me a follow on Twitter. It's on my handles on the display there. But that's pretty much it, really. Yeah, the main place is the YouTube stuff. So that's at the Blues Brothers, and then obviously my Twitter, which is just mainly Chelsea stuff, but there's sort of football bits and pieces in there. Is on the screen there as well. So yeah, that's the best place to find anything that I do.
Well, absolutely, we'll follow you. I think it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Charlie. It's great to find reasonable, like-minded, non-shouty fans that we can have pitch back and forth. We have sensible conversation with, but at the same time have a little bit of edge as well. So I would just want to thank you for your time. It's been great having you on the show. Really appreciate your time, mate.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully, hopefully result goes well for us, hopefully. But yeah, no, I've enjoyed it a lot, guys. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Anytime you want a Spurs fan on, we've got a large roster to pick from. So
yeah,
so
perfect. Definitely do that.
And we will absolutely catch up with you later in the season as well. See how we're getting on where we play the return.
Yeah, perfect.
HG, as ever, thanks for joining me all the way from Vienna.
Yeah, no problem. I've now got to do my prep for tomorrow. It's very, very late here, but it should be good. I'm excited.
What match are you commentating on?
So the game I'm commentating on is actually the third division of German football, and I suspect Jack might be able to watch if he's really that bothered. I hope he's not.
Dritte Liga, yeah.
Dritte Liga. I think it's on like YouTube over in the States, so I don't know if anyone's really going to watch that. But I'm also doing like the highlight package for one of the Bundesliga games afterwards. So that's probably a bit more fun, unless it's 0-0, and I've got to find 3 minutes to cover about what's not happened. But yeah, it should be a good day tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to tuning in. I will.
You're watching Dritte Liga, are you, caller? That would be fun.
You want to watch Borussia Dortmund kids, because that's who it is. It's like they're under 23.
No, the highlights program. The highlight.
Oh, the highlight one. Okay, well, yeah. When I find the link for the highlights, I'll share it with you, because that one should be a bit more available.
We'll stick it out on Cheese Room Twitter. All of us supporting you every step of the way. Jack, thanks again. Always a pleasure to have you on, mate.
Thanks for having me. And it's always been a pleasure. I would say might be a bit of a break. I'm actually headed on a surprisingly poorly timed family vacation. All my family is over in the East Coast, and there's one time a year where we all meet up. So I will probably miss maybe the next Cheese Room pod or two, but always been a pleasure. Looking forward to be back on. Hopefully the Emerson debut from Original, I think, has, gone well, and, it's blossomed from there. And then I would say, just for maybe flat cap purposes, if you want to learn more about Destiny, Udoji, or Udogi, even though you probably have about a year, to learn about the guy before he actually even wears the Spurs shirt, feel free to check it out on the Flat Cap channel. Thank you.
Yeah, do it. And check out Irish Hotspur as well, because we can quite often find you there, right, too.
Definitely. I would say, actually, we have a stats preview or kind of a match preview coming up pretty soon, so check that out as well, for sure.
Cool. Good stuff. Loads of good content from really good producers around YouTube. As always, until next time, come on, you Spurs. Up the Spurs.
Up the Spurs. Come on, you Spurs. And
you don't have to say it, Charlie. It's fine.
Go on, say it.
I can't say it.
Going, gone.